Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have almost 40 years of experience at NIH as an applicant and intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land almost $600 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee or water if it's hot where you live, and let's get started. So if you're attending live, just a reminder that you're in listen-only mode. You can start typing your questions into the Q&A box. If you're watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that today is July 23rd, 2025, and everything we're saying today is true to the best of our knowledge. But, things are changing incredibly fast at NIH, so buckle up and double check everything we're saying. What you should be viewing in the library right now, given that it's late July, I would think if you're targeting a fall deadline, you're probably working your way through the later chapters of, for example, Master the R series. You're probably watching chapters 3 and 4 on how to write the research strategy, and working your way through having your colleagues and mentors weigh in on the draft. Any NIH updates? I'm actually going to pause here and introduce our guest because I need help presenting this at this point. So our guest today, my friend, Dr. Rebecca Miro, is back to we had a mini tutorial planned, and we're still going to talk about that mini tutorial. The mini tutorial is on the types of grants you can apply for to help bridge you to a full-scale clinical trial funded at the R01 level. So like clinical trial planning grants at NIH, and the different types and when you might choose one versus another. There are a variety of options. But before we do that, Becky and I are going to, and we've been chatting about this over the last few business days, we're going to review the deluge of information that is being flying at us fast and furious from NIH. So I will say that the typical scenario at NIH, and of course we all know 2025, there's nothing typical about NIH in 2025, but the typical scenario is that NIH releases policy updates early in the calendar year via notices. Those are the things that start with NOT. So it would be, for example, NOT-25- and then whatever the notice is. And that is a notice coming out of the Office of the Director in FY25 and so on. And then there would be blog posts written by the director of the extramural program explaining those policy changes. That's a typical scenario. Right now, news is coming out in all kinds of atypical ways, not via the notices, and sometimes in channels that aren't even necessarily directly related to NIH. Which is posing a lot of challenges, because it means that those of us who try to stay on top of the news we have to be monitoring a lot of different outlets, a lot of different types of publications and news outlets, and blog posts and social media and all different types of publications in order to try and stay on top of this information. And not only that, because a lot of it's not coming out directly from NIH, of course, we have to ask ourselves how much of this is valid. Is it a reliable source? The fact that it's coming out in these atypical ways is contributing to confusion and panic and misinformation. So it's really challenging, even for us right now. Somebody like me who does this full time, it's really hard to kind of stay on top of these changes and to figure out what's true. So anyway, we're gonna run through some of the changes. I think that part of the reason that things are coming out in these atypical ways are that the communications offices at NIH have been dismissed. So hundreds of people who occupied the communications offices, which is what I worked in when I was at NIH. So a lot of my friends work in those offices. They've been let go. So the ways in which information is being released at NIH The channels, the people who would write those updates are not there anymore. And then furthermore, many of the veteran program officers have either been dismissed or retired. So information that they might have released also, we're losing a lot of institutional memory at NIH. And so things are very strange and atypical now. Furthermore, I think that there's a strategy in the current administration to release this kind of information in the dead of summer when people may not be paying such close attention. So, but we are paying attention. So let's run through some of this information that has come out just in the last couple of business days. So, and actually what I want to do is start by mentioning the animal studies information that we were talking about last time, where I said that I needed to look into this and I hadn't had time to read up on it. So I am going to put a link in the chat, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, let's see, here's the chat. We're going to talk a little bit about what that policy says. So animal model info, and here's the link. So basically what NIH has said, and they've put out, I put a link to an extramural nexus article from July 18th, and basically it says NIH will no longer develop new NOFOs focused exclusively on animal models of human disease. They are encouraging various approaches be considered in your research. Researchers may choose any model they deem appropriate, including a combination of different types of models to answer a research question. The policy is intended to open possibilities of which types of models, and it's not meant to be restrictive or prescriptive. Do with that what you will. But the goal is to prioritize human-based technologies and models where valid and justified. And NIH will continue to support grants using animal models if appropriate and justifiable, and your justification has to be incredibly carefully explained, including the usual things about making sure that you're using the minimum number of animals and that they will be treated appropriately. Is that fair, Becky? Have I captured that reasonably?
That sounds right, yes.
All right. So that is the best that I can understand that. There's more language in there, and about the ultimate goal being to eliminate animal research, which I just don't, I can't imagine that happening in any way, shape, or form. But I would encourage you to read that post, which has links to other types of information that NIH has put out. Why this has not been issued as a notice is perplexing to me, except that, again, we're losing institutional memory at NIH because so many people have been let go. So that was one piece of information. There was also a notice about, saying more information about not allowing AI. This came out on Friday. This was a notice, and I'm going to pop that URL in the chat. Whoops. So that notice restricts, again, the use of AI and restates that NIH is going to continue to use tools to try to determine if people are using AI to write their grant applications. The further piece of information in this notice is that they are explicitly stating that no individual researcher can submit as a PI more than 6 applications in a calendar year. So this applies to all activity codes except for anything in the T series or the R13 conference grants. So the T series, of course, are the institutional training grants, and R13s are the conference grants. They said that this likely affects a small number of PIs, and in fact, I would be hard-pressed to think of anyone I know who is submitting even 6 applications as a PI in a year. It doesn't matter if you're a co-I on something or a consultant, that's okay. They're talking about people who are PIs. They said something in one of the write-ups about this, about that there were applicants who were submitting up to 40 applications as PI in a calendar year. That seems astonishing to me. But I guess that's rather the point, is that it's not humanly possible without AI, which is why this is tacked into an AI notice. And this notice is under the euphemistic heading of, what was that heading, Becky? Let me see if I can.
Reporting fairness and originality in NIH research applications.
Yeah, so we had to really kind of read into it to figure out, oh, they're talking about AI and limiting the number of applications, like this, these are the sorts of euphemisms that are out there right now.
Here's there's a question in the Q&A related to this if you wanted to tackle that.
Let's pull that up. How do you advise on using AI in proposals, especially in light of this new policy? And I believe this is the policy, right? 132. What's your take on substantially develop? I would just not do it, Liz. At this point, I'm not recommending that people use it for anything. In the past, we've talked about my concerns about using it for things that had confidentiality issues, but that there might be a role for it, for example, in the 30-line project summary, or in developing maybe like your background information. But it seems like they're getting firmer and firmer in their statements about not using AI, and I haven't the foggiest idea what substantially developed means. I mean, they're talking in that notice. They talk about the ideas in the grant. What your scientific ideas are. So in theory, you should be able to use it to write a background section. But honestly, if it were me, I wouldn't be at this point. I would not be using it for anything, in my opinion. Okay, so I just want to see. Okay, I think that's the only one related specifically to this. So we're going to hold on the other questions for a moment while we review a few more things that have come out of NIH in the last few days. Let's see. There was a notice on Friday about foreign subawards for active projects and the statement on that. And of course, I just want to say that this is not something new. I've been in and around NIH on all sides of the fence for almost 40 years now. And since day one, Congress has expressed concern about NIH money, which of course is funded out of taxpayer dollars, going out of the country. That's always a concern, right? So there's always been a real uphill battle to be able to justify having subawards that are out of the country, because there are lots of economic models that people have generated about how if you invest NIH dollars in a given academic medical center or university, whatever it is, the economic stimulation that occurs locally where that award occurs. So you have you're hiring administrative staff and research techs, and you have meetings where they hire caterers to bring food in. Like, there's all kinds of economic stimulus that happens wherever award money is sent, and real concern on the part of Congress about sending that out of the country. So I just want to say this is not new. This concern is not new. But this particular notice says that both the primary award and foreign supplements will be removed from the streamlined non-competing award process, SNAP, and automatic carryover authority. The primary award and each foreign supplement will be issued with a distinct document number, will need to submit separate annual federal financial reports. There'll be no rebudgeting allowed between the primary award and supplements. And it goes on and on, basically tightening the noose, right? Like making it harder and harder to get these through, even on existing awards. So that was another one. There's one on NIH, and Becky, I'm going to have you do the two after this on that are administrative, because you'll know more about those than I do. But there is one on NIH policy and guidelines on the inclusion of women and minorities as subjects in clinical research. I've read and reread this notice, as has Becky, and the best I can tell is this is just more language that's targeting the words sex versus gender and not wanting trans people to be included as the sex with which they identify. So if you say women, that has to be assigned female at birth. That has to be, people who were identified as female at birth and not trans women. To the best of my knowledge, that's what that says. But again, read that notice on your own and see what you think. It's NOT-OD 25-131 if you want to read more about that. And then Becky, you want to take the other two, the administrative ones?
Sure. So this next one is titled New Policy Requirement to Train Senior Key Personnel on Other Support Disclosure Requirements. And I'll read from it directly. It requires NIH recipients to provide training to all faculty and research identified as senior key personnel on the requirement to disclose all research activities and affiliations, both active and pending, in other support. This takes effect October 1st. And so the recipient has to implement trainings in addition to maintaining written and enforced policy on all of this. So my guess is sponsored research offices will be developing some kind of training that they'll make anyone who's senior key personnel go through at some point before they will accept an award or set up the award. And then the last one was flexibilities for registration and results reporting.
Before you move on, I just want to comment on that. That again is not something new to this administration. This issue of disclosure of research activities and affiliations has been problematic for a lot of years, and disclosures and affiliations is something that NIH has really been pushing for transparency on this for quite some time, as are journals doing the same thing. So this is not something new, and in my opinion, not unreasonable. Like, this training is not unreasonable to really push people to be forthright and transparent about this.
A little further in this paragraph, and I didn't go the whole way down, but it says they have to disclose all resources made available to the researcher in support and or related to all of their research endeavors. So I think if they have some in-kind or something like that, this is just to reinforce that. Maybe I think faculty are easily, they know to report other grants, but it's the all sources or all resources that I think maybe use them. And I think that's what they're trying to reinforce.
Yeah. Okay, and then this other one, the flexibilities for registration?
Yeah, so flexibilities for registration and results reporting of prospective basic experimental studies with human participants, and that's the acronym BESH, B-E-S-H.
Yeah.
So and this one was just odd to me. It says NIH is indefinitely extending the period of delayed enforcement for registration and results reporting, originally announced and they linked to another NOT for BESH responsive to designated BESH NOFOs. And so if you're indefinitely extending it, the period of enforcement, so are they going to enforce it or not? Anyway.
I know. It's hard to know what to make of that one. This is like the kind of, I don't know.
And that one takes effect for applications on or after that are due on or after September 25th of this year.
So, and then another one that was reported, I think that this is not something that came out of NIH, nor do I think it will be, but it is very relevant to extramural applicants, was reported in Nature. And Becky was the one who found this and said, hey, have you seen this? So there was an article in Nature on July 14th, and this is related to the way review occurs at NIH. And just to remind people, because a lot of people don't realize this, there are two levels of review. First level of review is at the SRG, the Scientific Review Group. That's the study section meeting. It's, scientists in your field really giving a hard look at the science, and they award a score. That is not where your money is awarded. That's where your score is awarded. And if you're kind of, anywhere near the funding line, so below the funding line or in that zone of opportunity, as they're now calling it, which is the gray area around the funding line, you go on to council, And council is where the money is awarded. So what is a council? It's an advisory council to the institute director, and it meets 3 times a year. And they advise the institute director on all matters concerning the running of the institute. So there's an open session to this, and that's where they talk about like press releases and initiatives, and there are reporters there. And then there's a closed session where they talk about things like the budget and accounting and any sensitive matters. But this is also where grant funding decision is made. It's where the program officers present applications for funding consideration, and council is the one that votes on funding. And it's not just a straight like everything with this score and below gets funded. There's always something in that gray area that gets discussed, and program officers may feel that something should be funded because it exactly meets their funding priorities at this time. So the big question is, who's on council, right? Who are the people who make up council, these powerful people who make these funding decisions? It's all kinds of people. So, when I worked at NHGRI and I used to go to council meetings, it might be genetic counselors. It could be lawyers who work in the field of, genetics and genetic protections. It could be physicians. It could be people from private companies whose work aligns with the Institute mission. And there's also always some community members who are on these as well. And there's always, there has historically over the decades that I've known NIH, there's been an effort to really diversify the viewpoints on council. And, the people who are invited to serve are very carefully considered. So a batch of people were nominated to serve on council, and it's like study sections. You're invited to serve for like 3 years, 12 sessions, it meets 4 years rather. It's 3 sessions times 4 years, 12 consecutive sessions. And so a bunch of people were nominated to serve on council, and that occurred during the previous administration. Normally, this is a pro forma thing where the incoming administration says, yep, sounds good, and they sign off on it, but that has not been the case, apparently. And so there was an article in Nature, and I'm actually going to put that link in the... Actually, Becky, do you have that handy or no?
I do have the link.
Okay, if you want to drop that in the chat and just indicate that this has to do with dismissing council members. So the headline is, exclusive, NIH to dismiss dozens of grant reviewers to align with Trump priorities. So in it, they interview the former head of NHGRI, whose name is Eric Green. And I know Eric Green from when I worked at NHGRI. He was an intramural researcher at the time. And Eric was dismissed as the Institute Director of NHGRI back in the spring, and he still does not know why. But Nature is obviously a reliable publication, and they are quoting Eric, and I can tell you that Dr. Green is a very careful, conservative, honest, reliable source when it comes to information. And he is saying that all of their incoming council members who were nominated have been dismissed. They've been let go. So instead of having a panel of 25 or 30 people who are weighing in on this, there are now like 6 who are on there. And, that's clearly not enough to have a diversified viewpoint. And there's a lot of concern about why they were dismissed and who will be appointed instead and who will be making those appointments. But we can make some educated guesses about that. So what do you do about that as an applicant? My advice is the same as it is about all matters pertaining to the current administration. They are here for the next 3.5 years. It is what it is. And we have to figure out ways to survive the changes that are occurring at NIH. Even if there's a draconian budget cut at NIH, this agency is not going away. The administration has recommended nearly halving the FY26 budget to NIH. It's still like triple what other agencies are, even if they have it. So, it's still worth, in my opinion, trying to figure out how to make this work. And some of the things that I'm recommending to my clients are that, if you're doing DEI research, try to figure out how to talk about comparative effectiveness among cohorts so that you can have, ultimately the most efficacious interventions that reduce societal burden and reduce cost. Anything that's going to talk about comparative effectiveness, cost savings, making treatments more efficacious, and just talking about cohorts. You don't have to talk about, like we're trying to, address health disparities or expand access to care to underserved populations. That sort of language is not going to fly. But if you couch it as we're trying to do this research to figure out how to make, to do comparative effectiveness research, to figure out how to make this as efficacious as possible to reduce cost and reduce societal burden. Anything you can do to try to steer your language in that direction is going to be helpful. And I recognize this is a broad brushstroke and that strategy isn't going to work for all of you. But for many of my clients, I'm finding that they don't necessarily have to dramatically change research direction. They have to change the way they talk about what they're doing. And so I want to encourage people not to panic and to really think deeply about how what matters to the current administration and how to stay afloat, even from a business person's perspective, thinking about how to stay afloat until we can weather this particular storm. Anyway, that was a long-winded.
Going to interject you real quick. If Riley can drop that URL, because I have a feeling that what's in the chat, your audience can't see. I don't think I have the right permissions.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Riley.
Okay. All right, so all those chats are in there. All those URLs are in there, and I see there are a couple of questions. Okay, there are like 3 questions in the chat and another one that came by email, and we also want to do a mini tutorial. So, Becky, let's see if we can do this mini tutorial in like 10 minutes.
All right, hang on. I've lost my ability here to.
Let me see if I can.
No, I can share. I just lost the screen for a sec. Oops.
Okay. So, Becky and I were having a conversation about how to advise applicants concerning preparing for an eventual full-scale trial at the R01 level. Most people are not going to be successful just right out of the gate applying for NIH funding at the R01 level to fund a full-scale trial, particularly if it's interventional, multi-site. Usually you have to kind of stair-step your way up to these things. You usually start with these planning grants, and then you move on to observational trials, single site, and kind of like work your way up to, an interventional multi-site R01 funded trial. So we were talking about the different types of mechanisms, and so we kind of laid them out here. This is what we kind of came up with, and we did our best. Some of these were head scratchers for us. So the really obvious ones to me were the R34, followed by the R61, R33, followed by the R21. And what I didn't realize was that the R61 and the R33, you could apply to those as individual mechanisms. So Becky and I are going to talk about that a little bit. Nor did I realize that that some institutes issue the R21, R33 phased. I almost always see it as the R61, R33. And because I was not aware of all of these, I kind of thought you probably were not either. So Becky, let's talk a little bit about these, and I'm going to kick it off with the R34 because I'm super familiar with that one. So if I have an applicant who comes to me and says, I want to do a clinical trial planning grant, our first stop, almost without question, is going to be the R34. The R34 is, it's a planning grant most often used as a clinical trial planning grant. There used to be a parent announcement. So for those of you who have been around a while, just an FYI, there's no more parent announcement. But many institutes sponsor their own R34. And there may be little quirks about an institute-specific NOFO for an R34. So you're going to have to read carefully. But what I will say is that it is typically a 3-year award, and it's typically capped at 450,000 directs. And when we went on the active NOFO search engine, I was able to find 17 active R34s, and some of those have multiple ICs that sponsor a single one. So I would say most institutes have some version of an R34. It might not fit your topic, but there is likely at your institute some version of an R34. And and this typically, I don't think we have this in this particular table, but this typically is meant to fund aspects of that would inform the design of the full-scale trial at the R01 level. So you're meant to kind of like refine, for example, your recruitment and retention strategy, that kind of thing. To get the team, experienced in working together. It's that kind of you're not like doing an intervention and looking for efficacy of an intervention. That's not really what this is meant for. At the end of the R34, you should have all the information you need to inform the design of the full-scale trial at the R01 level. And that's exactly how you should write it in the application. So at the end of each aim, talk about a deliverable, and that deliverable should inform the design of the full-scale trial at the R01 level. That's how you want to write it. So that's, probably the most important one for you to know about in this whole table. So Becky, you want to pick one of the other ones to talk about?
Sure. So next one I had in no particular order here, the R21, which is to the left. So that's the one that most people know about. It's the exploratory developmental grants. They're not usually designed as clinical trial planning grants, so make sure to read the NOFO carefully as to what is and isn't allowed to be proposed under the NOFO that you're interested in. Talk to your PO. That's Meg's slogan, right? Talk to the program officer always. And there's the parent R21, and there's also a lot of NOFOs that are institute and center specific.
Yeah. And of course, the budget here is smaller and the time is less. So this is kind of like the bare minimum that you can squeak by with, 2 years. Most of them are 275 total directs across the life of the grant. That's not a lot, so that's really kind of the bare minimum I think that most people can use. And we might as well just go ahead and do the R21, R33 next. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so the R21, R33, just like the R61, R33, is what they call the biphasic approach. So when you're applying, you actually apply for the two R21 and R33 together. But before you're allowed to proceed to the R33 phase, you have to meet certain milestones in the R21. And when we search the active NOFOs, there's 3 active ones for the R21, R33 pairing. What I was looking at, what was interesting is, so in a normal R21, you have 2 years and 275,000 direct costs. In the R21, R33, your first 2 years turns into, you're limited to 125 per year. So I said to Meg, I said, well, you're kind of getting shorted by $25,000. And she said, yes, but you don't have to apply for another grant because you move into the R33 as long as you've met your milestones. So there's that.
Yeah. So the thing is, if people don't know what these biphasic awards are, you have to write them with milestones in mind. So when you see this slash like this, where there's 2 mechanisms of any kind, it could be K99, R00, R61, R33. These are called biphasic awards. And basically there's a point at the end of the first phase where there's a go, no-go decision on the part of the program staff. So you have to write your milestones into the application so that when you write your progress reports, your non-competing renewals, they can determine if you have been successful. What is the operational definition of success? Have you been successful on the first phase so that they can make the go, no-go decision to waive you on to the second phase? They can terminate you at the end of that first phase. The R61, R33 is the more common of the two for sure. And the reason you would choose that over the R21, R33 is that the budget on the R61 is larger. So in general, like so these biphasic ones, it's kind of like the first phase is like the early phase, and the R33 is the second phase. So in terms of early phase, your choices are the R21, R34, or R61. So the R34 cannot be combined with an R33, but the other two can. Of those three, for the early phase, the R21 is the smallest budget, followed by the R34, followed by the R61. The R61 is the one you choose if you need the bigger budget. So, and Becky, do you want to talk about the R61 and R33 as standalone mechanisms, which was something brand new to me? I've never known anyone to apply for them that way.
Yeah, so the R61 alone is also termed an exploratory developmental grant. And from I decided to actually click on a lot of these, in particular NOFOs, and that was a rabbit hole. And this is what I'm about to say is true for a lot of these mechanisms. Some allow clinical trials, some are optional, some don't allow them. So you really have to just see what's out there and look and see what you need. So the R61, the budgets were sort of everywhere, all over the place, because there was a standalone R61 that limits it to $150,000 directs per year. There's one from NIAMS though that is $600,000 over the 3 years, and no more than $300,000 in 1 year, which is pretty big difference from just $150,000. For the R61, R33s, the phased ones, the budgets were all over the place. So, for example, NHLBI had one that was $250,000 for the R61 piece, but then R33 piece was up to $1.5 million in directs, and there was a different NHLBI that just had no limit.
But of course, you have to justify whatever you request.
Right. And the other part of this was that, well, it's really common to go from the R61 to the R33. It's not required. If you get a standalone R61, and at the end of that, you can move directly to an R01. Similarly, you don't have to have an R61 or an R21 before the R33. In that scenario, if your project is in a position that you meet the requirements of the R33, you can apply for that.
So I know that's a lot of information, and basically the take-home message is that for the early phase part, R21, R34, and R61 are probably your bet, and the budget, I just laid them out in increasing budget size, and the R33 is kind of the second phase of that, and then you move on to the R01. They can occur, several of these can occur as biphasic mechanisms, and you could just do an early phase and go to the R01. You could do a late phase and go to the R01. You could do a biphasic and move on to the R01. These are all strategies, different strategies for you to stair step up to the full scale trial funded at the R01 level.
I have a question for you. Do you think that doing a clinical trial planning grant puts you in a better position to land an R01, either because you gain more knowledge or because they see that you're a previous awardee?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of successful R34 grantees are well positioned to land their R01, especially if it's at the same institute, because you're a known quantity. But of course, like the caveat there is that you have to be successful at that grant. You have to do exactly what you said you're going to do do it on time and within the budget allocated, and everything is going the way it's supposed to. But I don't want to discourage people who are, I have had applicants who have extensive clinical trial experience that has nothing whatsoever to do with NIH. They never did any of these. They developed their clinical trial experience in industry or through other federal agencies, or have moved here from other countries, but they have this extensive clinical trial record with lots of publications. And I've seen people be successful at that as well. So I don't want people to feel like this is your only option for getting yourself to the R01 funded trial. There are many, many roads to get there. And you don't necessarily even have to take an NIH road to get there. But these are, I would say that, it's a lot. I'm always relieved when I have an R01 applicant come to me for help for their first R01 funded clinical trial if they've had a successful R34, because I know that the bar is going to be lower for us to be successful. So it's not a slam dunk, and you can certainly be successful not doing that. But yeah, I think it does put you in a good position. So, okay, so let's turn our attention to the questions. Okay, let's see. We answered the AI one. I have a scored NIH grant, and the program director indicated about a month ago that it was approved on her end. However, I haven't received the notice of award yet. Given that the NIH fiscal year ends in September, I'm starting to feel a bit concerned. Do you have any insights or suggestions on how to proceed? Thanks. Well, I would contact that program officer and say, I understood you to say that this was approved for funding, but I have not gotten my notice of award. Do you know when the notice of award would be issued? Because I would like to make plans for the start of the grant. I actually, I know that you're saying the end of the fiscal year is coming up, but often a lot of things get funded in the flurry of activity at the end of the fiscal year. So sometimes a lot of notices of award go out in late August and September, because NIH has a better sense of what the remaining money is on that FY. And, certainly the budget situation has been a little crazy this year. They're on a full year continuing resolution right now. So I wouldn't despair, but I would ask the PO, like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what the start date is for the project. So, like, do you know when the notice of award will be issued? And it could be it moved into FY26. That would be less desirable because, of course, we don't know if there's going to be a budget cut. But hopefully it'll be picked up in the flurry of funding at the end of the fiscal year. So fingers crossed for you. And we have a comment here. I love seeing this occasional breadcrumbs of exceptional and fraudulent activity funded by the NIH. Yeah, those are the misconduct ones. Reading the NIH notices of investigations of scientific misconduct and the penalties levied is a minor hobby. Yeah, when I first started reading the notices, I used to read those too. It was like kind of salacious and entertaining, but I've given up reading those. I can barely keep up with the news anymore. Okay, at NIA, across country comparisons of US and other countries using NIA-funded datasets was a priority for NIH. Any updates on whether to conduct such studies going forward on countries using secondary data that have research implications to the US? Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've actually worked on some of those, trans-country initiatives out of NIA. I'm thinking in particular about genetic studies on Alzheimer's, so databases that were centered in different countries to try to get like a very comprehensive database of Alzheimer's genetics. And I actually don't know, and I would ask the program officer if I were you, because I suspect that's a moving target. And the answer today might be different than the answer next week or next month. So I would ask, since the rules seem to be changing. For which of the mechanisms secondary data is allowed? Yeah, this is an addendum to the previous one. So I would ask the PO. Clinical trials are most clinical using electronic health records. Which mechanisms allow non-clinical population-based research on varied cohorts? There are thousands of NOFOs. I don't even know how to begin to answer that question. So you'd have to look.
You can use, yeah, there's keyword, is a keyword option in the under funding opportunity page.
In the search engine,
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. Do you want to say a little more about that? And I'll pull up that URL while you talk.
Yeah, so NIH has the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts is the site, and you can search for funding opportunities, but there's an advanced search option, and you get a fair amount of stuff that you can search, and one of the options is via keyword. So that might be a starting point.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen so that people can see it. So this is what the search engine looks like. So let's see, are you guys seeing the search engine? I can't tell.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's here's the keyword search here. So that's a possibility. And I'll put the URL for that in the chat. I may not be understanding what you're asking. If I'm not understanding what you're asking, let me know. NoFo search engine. This is for active NoFos. And I'm just dropping that in the chat. Isn't NIH favoring clinical research over population research using secondary data, just like it used to favor biomedical animal basic risk science research? These kind of sweeping generalizations don't usually apply across institutes. And I don't know if either of those statements is true. So again, this is something that I think is a moving target. And may vary by institute. There are very few things that are universal across institutes, and especially now it's really hard to get a handle on what's going on in any given institute, let alone NIH as a whole. So that would be probably a question for your program officer. Okay, and I think that was the last of the questions typed here. So we'll just end with a question I got emailed. And Becky, I'm curious of what you say about this, but the person said, when an RFA states the following, does it refer to, so this person is saying the RFA states the following: NIH intends to commit approximate, and this is an RFA, so it's not parent announcement. It's a topic specific RFA where there's a finite pot of money, and when the money runs out, that's it. That's how RFAs work at NIH. NIH intends to commit approximately X million dollars in FY26 to make approximately Y awards, depending on the size and scope of the most meritorious awards. And the person's question was, does it when they talk about X million dollars in FY26 to allocate, are they talking about the awards they make in the first year of the grant or over the course of the grant? And my understanding is it's just what they're releasing in that first year of the grant. It's not over the whole life of the grant. So
yeah, that's how I would interpret it also, given that they release it by year.
Because they can always, I hate to say it, but like all institutes, even when they have like a 5-year RFA, they can only commit to making 1-year award at a time. They say that it's a 5-year award and they're planning for that. And, but, the institutes, like everybody else in the country, can't plan beyond one fiscal year in terms of their budget. So they only release the money 1 year at a time. So if they're making, let's say they say we have $10 million and we're hoping to make 5 that we're releasing in FY26, and we're hoping to make 20 awards. That means they're thinking they're going to do $500,000 per award per year, which would be like a typical R01 funding level. So that's usually what that means. Now, having said that, I say that with the caveat that I don't know who's writing out NOFOs anymore, because program staff have been decimated and a lot of veteran program officers have been let go or have quit. So, that's typically what this language means. But, we're in unprecedented times here, folks. So always best to contact the program officer and double check that that is indeed what they mean. Okay, so we are 6 minutes over. That wasn't too bad. So I think our next guest on is on August 6th, right? That's two weeks from today. And that guest, we're gonna welcome back Burr Zimmerman, who's going to talk about how it's still important to align with your institute's funding priorities, even in these strange times. So we haven't had Burr on in a while, so we're thrilled to have him back. Becky also knows Burr. Print writing is a small world. We all kind of know each other, so we're all just down here trying to survive like you all are. So anyway, we're rooting for you. We are all rooting for you. There are a lot of people who believe in what you do, who believe that the work you do is important. We're doing everything in our power to help you be successful in a funding climate that is the most difficult I've seen in the course of my career. And as the French would say, courage, we are rooting for you, hang in there. And I wish you all the very best of luck. And we will see you back here in 2 weeks. And also, there's a First Fridays on August 1st. So that's my drop-in office hours, virtual office hours. If anybody wants to come and talk about any issue pertaining to grant writing, you're welcome to do that. If you are not signed up for First Fridays and you're a member, just email me, meg@bouviergrant.com, and we'll get you signed up. And I'll see you either, I hope, on August 1st or for First Fridays or on August 6th. Becky, as always, thank you so much for wading through the morass with me.
Always fun to have someone to do it with and question whether you've read it correctly or not.
Exactly. So, and everybody hang in there, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.